Please note, the footage in this video isn't footage of the process of making the peak. Instead, it's footage from CLYW's Summit documentary that they kindly gave me permission to use. To the video. Caribou Lodge Yo-Yo Works, abbreviated and most commonly referred to as CLYW, stands as one of few modern yo-yo manufacturing companies that started before 2010 that are still currently successful and iconic. CLYW was founded in August of 2006 by Chris McCullen and Paul Wallace, marking the beginning of a company that would go on to make iconic designs, sponsor world champions, and crash websites with their releases. However, the history and beginning of CLYW are marked with one important yo-yo, the first Caribou Lodge yo-yo, the original CLYW Peak. The original Peak was designed cooperatively by Chris McCullen and Paul Wallace. Designing the Peak was a brief process, taking only an evening to design cooperatively due to good planning. The earliest CAD of the Peak features an organic, orange yo-yo with white outer rims, another set of white rims deeper in the profile of the yo-yo, and an inner cup design featuring a strange protruding nipple. The final design of the original Peak was given a spec sheet created by Chris. While the specs of the original Peak may be subpar for today, something to be understood is that the scene was changing drastically at the time. Yo-yos like the Yo-Yo Jam Hitman and the Yo-Yo Factory Fast 401k, which can be seen mentioned on the Peak spec sheet, were iconic at the time. The Hitman, in particular, was used to win the 2003 World Yo-Yo Contest 1A Division. Of course, designs like Duncan's Freehand Zero, which would be modified, countless yo-yos from Yo-Yo Jam, the H-Spin Pyro, and the Yo-Yo Factory Grind Machine were immensely popular at the time. Nowadays, these yo-yos are considered collectibles, vintage treasures from an era where yo-yos were mostly still responsive or semi-responsive. The Peak, however, is distinct in being completely unresponsive and would mark a characteristic shift in the scene at the time. You can see the resemblance between a handful of Yo-Yo Jam yo-yos, notably the Hitman and more so the original Dark Magic, and the Peak. The Peak, as a whole, had similar characteristics to many yo-yos released at the time. Among other things, an organic profile and a tight response gap, which was mostly standard for the time. With the announcement of Caribou Lodge on August 14, 2006, Chris also announced their first yo-yo, the Peak. The original announcement featured a handful of pictures of the Peak 0000, a raw prototype of the Peak. A few days later, Chris would share a few more pictures of a solid red Peak, which later became painted Proto 0001, a solid white Peak nicknamed Black Clouds over Snow, and another raw Peak. As September rolled around, forum members Pekka, Boyd, Anarch Yo-Yo, and Parasite are announced to be the ones to test the Peak in its prototyping stages. Later in September, Chris would share a design sent to him by Levi from 3 Design Paint, and subsequently, we'd get our first look at Peaks that were up to Chris's production standards. These original pictures of the Peak both featured a white solid body, but with one, the cup and profile are airbrushed blue, as well as having the silhouette of a mountain on one half of the profile in the same shade of blue, titled Blue Proto Peak 0002. The other Peak, titled Snow White Proto Peak 0003, has the same silhouette of a mountain, though it is gray, with white airbrushing, to make it seem like snow on a gray mountain. All in all, there were 6 prototypes made of the original Peak. All of these prototypes were made at a machine shop that a friend, name unknown, of Chris McCullen ran, who kindly kept a promise they made to Chris to make a few yo-yos after Chris helped the owner out. However, none of these prototypes played quite how Chris wanted them to, with Chris describing them as having a weird thud. So, Chris went ahead and hand-modified one of the prototypes by taking a Dremel and widening the response groove. Quote, "I had to figure out where the thud was coming from. By modifying the groove, this helped so much." At the time, the industry standard was to use diff pads, a type of response pad, which was too narrow for another type of response. Flowable silicone. Flowable silicone became an industry standard later on, and the Peak was an early adopter. After finding that the thud in the Peak was now absent, Chris sent the other 5 prototypes back to the machine shop to have their response areas widened so they could also have flowable silicone response pads. The original Peak, Raw Proto 0000, as far as it is known, is owned by Yo-Yo Brothers. The unnumbered Raw prototype was sent to user Parasite for testing, who eventually was forced to pass it back to Paul Wallace due to being a, quote, bad man. The exact owner or location of this Peak is unknown, but it's believed to be somewhere in North America. The black clouds over snow peak was sent to user Boyd for testing, who used it to win multiple contests and is noted in Ben's thread as being, quote, the only tester to provide really valuable feedback. Boyd was allowed to keep this prototype peak, and as far as it is known, he still owns it. The red painted peak 0001 was anodized red, but had white mountains airbrushed onto the profile and was marked with 0001. As far as it is known, Chris never parted with this particular peak, and he still owns it. The blue 0002 peak was sent to user Pekka for testing, and as far as it is known, is currently owned by Yo-Yo Brothers. The snow white 0003 peak was sent to user Anarch Yo-Yo for testing, passed back to Paul, and as far as it is known, was sold to and is still owned by user Elefark. The final peak, compared to the prototype, had a wider response area, the weight was brought down, the inner cup was given grooves, and the response gap was slightly wider. And from here on, the term OG peak, so it's known for the rest of the video, will mean it's a specific kind of peak, a Levi painted peak. Otherwise, they'll be referred to and specified by run, colorway, or if they're a prototype. After the issues of the prototype peaks were ironed out, the shop that had machined the prototype peaks recommended a bigger machine shop to Chris due to a full production run of the peak just not being feasible with their hardware. So, Chris moved to this bigger machine shop, which will be referred to as the first machine shop for the rest of the video. Unfortunately, the machine shop in charge of machining the first production run of peaks did a few unsatisfactory things, most notably, and, to quote Chris, they modified a lot without me knowing they did. Was a miracle it played well. There were 2 batches made at the shop of the peak, less than 100 for the first run. According to Chris, 20 raw peaks were held for custom orders. In the end though, most of these custom orders ended up just being sold raw to friends. This first machine shop machined the OG peaks. 8 of the peaks were sent to forum user and anodizer Pioneer to test some anodizing finishes. The first announcement from Chris was the announcement of the Hood Ride peak, a colorway that featured a golden anodized cup with a raw profile. The Hood Ride peak is, as far as it is known, in the possession of user Ran. The run this peak came from featured 3 other peaks, 2 black peaks and a gold peak nicknamed Solid Gold Dancer. However, the upcoming peaks were going to feature something much more iconic today. 2 peaks, one marked G. Simeon for Paul Wallace and Seafoam for Chris McCullen, were made. These peaks featured a distinctly unique colorway, white with a teal silhouette of a mountain on the profile. These are the only 2 peaks in the world done like this. As far as I could find out, Paul still owns his teal mountain peak. Chris, unfortunately, lost his teal mountain peak to a scam. It's not completely lost though, as the peak is somewhere in North America. Another unique peak was made for user Boyd, a white body with winter green mountains. Unfortunately, it was stolen at a contest. The current location of this peak is unknown. On November 18th, 2006, Chris showcased the painted peak. As far as it is known, Chris still owns this peak. The peaks mentioned before are all unique or one of a kind. After those peaks were custom painted by Levi and Chris, Levi took 50 peaks, numbered them, and painted all but one alike. The peaks each had the same silhouette mountain as the peaks of the past, and each was numbered 1 through 50. All of these peaks, with one exception, had a blue silhouette of a mountain. The one exception to this was the 50th peak, which was given pink mountains instead of blue. Extra pink mountain peaks were made and sent to, as well as being marked David and Pekka for the testers. The process of painting these original peaks was done in an auto body shop in Camrose, Alberta, by Levi and Chris working together over 13 hours, with Chris prepping and Levi doing the actual painting. According to Chris, they ate donuts. These original 50 peaks, the teal G. Simeon and Seafoam peaks, the lost wintergreen Boyd peak, and finally the pink David and Pekka peaks are considered the OG painted peaks. Levi kept the number 1 peak, number 50 was sold directly to someone before hitting retail, and one was held back from being sent to retailers due to Vibe. As far as it is known, the Vibey peak was sent to the National Yo-Yo Museum in Chico, California. So, the 47 of the OG peaks hit the retailer Yo-Yo Nation. They sold out in 10 minutes. Mint OGs are extremely rare and valuable in the modern yo-yo market, with some people willing to offer entire collections for a single, non-mint painted peak. The Museum of Yo-Yo History estimates the cash value of a mint painted peak to be about $850. On the other hand, CLYW collectors estimate a mint painted peak is worth about $2,000 US. It took an entire year for Chris to order a second batch of peaks from the first machine shop, as he'd moved to a different machine shop, which will be known as the second machine shop later in the video, that couldn't make a peak that was up to Chris's standards for quite some time. So, Chris ordered another batch of peaks from the first machine shop, all of which were anodized in the iconic and CLYW mainstay colorway 28 Stories. Parts of the profits made from 28 Stories peaks would go to HIV/AIDS research. However, the machine shop notoriously scuffed the production of the second batch, with almost every other cup having an undesirable flat spike or nipple. The release of the 28 Stories peak in 2007 would mark the last of the first run. By mid-2008, the second machine shop was finally able to get a hold on how to machine and manufacture the peak. Peaks from this machine shop are known as second-run peaks. 20 of these peaks, according to my count, were custom painted and released on eBay by Levi. These custom eBay-sold peaks are known as eBay peaks. Rapid fire, here are all of the designs I could find with a name, description, or picture. Plaid with blue mountains, blue with orange mountains, black with gold flecks and mountains, green with black trees, red plaid with black mountains, brown with orange mountains, black with 24-karat gold leaf mountains and lightning bolt, navy blue with lightning, blue with baby blue mountains, brown with pink mountains, blue with pink mountain fade, brown with gold flecks and mountains, hand textured with green outline mountains, wood grain with black mountains, Iron Maiden, O Canada A, which is not the same as the A peak, Canadian flag colors, one half's red, the other half's white with a red maple leaf, metallic aqua with slime green mountains, Super Mario Bros, Jawbreaker 1, Jawbreaker 2, Transformers, Batman and Joker, Atari, and Left Behind. There are likely more custom peaks that I wasn't able to find just by poking around. Also, I couldn't find a community name/description for a handful of the peaks featured in this image: the bleeding smiley face, the green with black stripes, and a few of the others. Chris had sent the CAD file of the peak to a machine shop in China. Only one of these yo-yo exists. The machine shop got the width and diameter correct, but they scuffed the profile of the peak. To quote Chris, "The profile is shaped more like an H-spin pyro." Only 3 halves of the yo-yo were manufactured, and Chris kept one of the 3 halves. The current owner of the full China peak is, as far as it's known, Yo-Yo Brothers. After the first machine shop's issues, Chris kept trying for peaks from the second machine shop, despite the second machine shop's issues with the peak's CAD. See, the peaks that came out of the first machine shop were joked about for having a characteristic vibe. Not to mention the flat nipples that plagued the 28 Stories release. And though it took the second machine shop over a year, eventually the shop was able to machine a few peaks that were up to Chris's standards. The issue was, the second shop's machines and tooling just weren't designed for the sensitivity and tolerances required to manufacture yo-yos from CAD designs. Because of this, despite no actual changes to the CAD sent to the second shop, there were still changes made to the second run of peaks. These changes are as follows: a 90-degree edge on the outer lip, a circle in the cup caused by a tool change, and the machine shop missed the target weight. A lot of these were unrequested by Chris, but Chris never personally went public with these changes. After all, it's not exactly a good business strategy to say your machine shop couldn't make your yo-yo how you designed it. However, Paul Wallace wasn't so quiet. Paul was actually quite unhappy with the first run of peaks, specifically saying that the only yo-yo that followed his vision of the peak was the prototype. Ultimately, though, it's believed that this mindset was caused more by the stresses of starting CLYW and the designing of the peak, as the process had driven a wedge between Paul and Chris. Alas, the second run of peaks was going to be released, and it was known that this run was going to be sent to Grunt Bowl for anodizing instead of Pioneer or Levi. Gonna keep this brief, but there were 8 peaks anodized by Pioneer. Team Edition, brown with electric blue splash, with light splash, as far as it's known, is owned by Yo-Yo Brothers. Team Edition, brown with electric blue splash, with heavy splash, as far as it's known, is owned by Chris McCullen. Brown with electric green splash, as far as it's known, is owned by user Sebi. Black and blue acid wash with the Proto Slip Matte finish, as far as it's known, is owned by Yo-Yo Brothers. Green and blue acid wash, as far as it's known, is owned by user Elefark, with another given by Chris to his former boss, who supported him when he started CLYW. Boyd Peak, half black and blue wash with the Proto Slip Matte finish, half brown with electric green splash, as far as it's known, is owned by Yo-Yo Brothers. Alex Peak, half black and blue wash with proto slip matte finish, half brown with electric green splash, as far as it's known, is owned by CLYW team member Alex. Grunt Bowl sent 6 test anodizations back to Chris, 3 blue and 3 copper peaks, each of which were sold privately. There was a full release of second run peaks on the CLYW store on February 4th, 2009 at 1 a.m. Central Standard Time that was gone in 5 minutes. The colorways were 5 gold with a light gold splash and 20 magenta with a lime green splash for this specific release. Meanwhile, there were still peaks being sent to Grunt Bowl for testing colorways. The colorways are as follows: gray to baby blue fade with orange splash. This was intended to be baby blue with orange splash, but Grunt Bowl scuffed the colors. Less than 10 were made. Gold with black splash, nicknamed Gold Nugget. This colorway would give rise to the official CLYW nickname for B grades, Fool's Gold, due to over 20 of the 25 of this colorway made being vibey. Burnt orange with gold splash, nicknamed Iron Man. 35 were made, but 25 or more were marked as Fool's Gold due to vibe. These were supposed to go out to winners of a weekly video competition CLYW was hosting, but there weren't enough A grades to distribute to the winners. Pewter with orange splash, nicknamed the Lava Peak. 15 were made, 3 were sold to the public. These were intended to be sent as grand prizes, but due to the shortage of A-grade Ironman peaks, these were sent instead. Gray fade, 10 were made, the fade wasn't well done however. Orange with light gray splash, between 15 and 20 made. However, some peaks were sent to Sebastian Brock for anodizing, so not every peak in this colorway has the same finish. On March 20th, 2009 and March 21st, 2009, there were 2 batches released of Jensen Kimmett's Hulk Smash Peak, a colorway that CLYW still releases today. Both of these batches, totaling over 100 yo-yos between the 2 batches, sold out before the end of the day. The formerly mentioned Sebastian Brock peaks were released on March 31st, 2009. On April 4th, 2009, there was a 3-way major release of the peak. 100 28 stories peaks done by Grunt Bowl, 48 Chesterman Beach peaks, and 20 Clearview Station peaks. A handful of Clearview Station peaks were sold privately before hitting retailers, and due to Pioneer anodizing the Clearview Station peaks, they were sandblasted rather than bead blasted. At this point, 350 peaks were released in under a month. A few colorways that haven't been mentioned are the Maple Drip line of peaks, on screen now. Other colorways, rapid fire, are Royal Bison, all would have been marked as B grades today. Pink and Purple Wash, a large run that was mostly B grades, only 12 A grades exist. Chocolate with a red splash, only 4 A grades exist. Wolf Lake, my favorite colorway. Blue with a clear splash. I would personally love for there to be more releases in this colorway in the modern day. Hot Pink Solids. Winter Green was light green with clear splash. Grizzly Bear Clowntown 1, 20 made. Grizzly Bear Clowntown 2. Frozen Mammoth. Then, the Adam Brewster's Wedding, a handful of limited peaks made for a wedding in 2009. 1 was made for Adam, 3 for the groomsmen, and 2 for the ushers. The colorway was Dark Sage with Robin's Egg Blue Splash. Another notable colorway, Alex Bearing Gull, is popular due to being from a batch of exceptionally high-quality second-run peaks. Supposedly, these play the best in the second run. The colorway is red with a clear splash. Finally, amateur anodizer Vendetta test anodized 6 peaks under the mentorship of someone named Rick. He made 3 Earth Swirl peaks, 3 Fire Swirl peaks, and one of the Fire Swirl peaks is lost. These are the only peaks that exist from Vendetta and are extremely rare and highly sought after. The third run of peaks is famous for being the one that most closely followed what Paul Wallace wanted in the peak. At the second machine shop, Chris was able to make a CAD design that the shop was able to interpret closely to the original peak prototypes, after almost 4 full years. These peaks have the original target weight, and no longer have the 90-degree lip that was present on second run peaks. Visually, the third and first run peaks are the same. The first batch of these peaks went to a UK retailer on November 27, 2009, and sold out almost instantly. Some were also sold on a US retailer, but the exact date of release and sold out time are unknown. It is believed they sold out just as fast. These peaks had 3 unique colorways: orange on orange, acid splash, green on green, acid splash, and purple on purple, acid splash. A second batch was sold on a US retailer on August 23, 2010, 9 months after the first batch, with 3 new colorways that were signature colorways for 3 individuals. Elliot Jackson, pink with blue drip. Adam Brewster, green with gray and red splash. Christian Kaluza, blue with an orange and clear splash. These 3 colorways sold out quickly, with the pink and blue drip being the last to sell out on August 25th, 2010. That release was the last retail release of a CLYW Peak. It wouldn't be until 2016 that CLYW would revisit the Peak for the 10-year anniversary of the release of the first Peak. The new Peak, the Peak 2, was designed to be utilized better for modern play. After the date of August 25th, 2010, the only way someone could get their hands on the first Peak would be on BST, as CLYW never made another run. And with that, the first Peak was officially retired. Special thanks to the following. Benjamin Justin Baker, who unfortunately passed away, is the author of the original thread that supplied 95% of the information in this video. My friend Griffin, who supplied new information of the whereabouts of the OG Peaks. Yo-Yo Brothers for allowing me to use loads of pictures of the Peaks and their colorways that they own. Eric of MK1 and Josh of Not Creators, also known as J Cheetah, for knowledge of the scene at the time of the Peaks release. Mark of MK1 for sending me Ben's thread. Chris McCullen himself for providing more information that was missing from Ben's thread, and CLYW for allowing me to use the footage from the Summit documentary. I appreciate the support and help from all of these individuals or groups. It means a lot, and I don't think this video would be possible without them. So, yeah.